I see the similar shift that baseball went through in sales, where as they become more digitally aware, more digitally enabled, that the relationship between marketing and sales will change. And one example of that is a qualified lead. So if you get a qualified lead from marketing, you hand it off to sales. How valuable is that to sales when they already have prospecting tools?
This episode is brought to you by Postal.io, a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Learn how you can integrate direct mail and gifting into your existing strategy by visiting Postal.io. Hey there, welcome to episode 290. My guest on this episode is Ed Terpening, industry analyst at Altimeter Group. Ed, welcome back to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Hey, thanks, Bernie. It's great to be back. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, great to talk to you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation on a topic that I think is highly relevant for all of us here in 2021. So I'm not going to give you the pop quiz. I will just tell you that it's been a while since you've been with me on the podcast. You were episode 139 in November of 2016.
Wow.
Yeah. And we discussed at that time the state of social business. And it's interesting how we were calling it social business back then, a little over 3 years ago. That was late 2016. Actually, 4 years ago. What am I doing? Bad math. So interesting how things have changed, right? We don't really call it social business anymore, do we?
No, it's just more channels than that now. Social business was a great way to sort of understand relationships and connecting connections between buyers and sellers. But now we just have so many different channels, so many different platforms, and enablement has also come a long way.
Yeah. And it's really more about digital than social, right? Because digital is more of a bigger umbrella and social is a part of that.
Exactly.
So we are here to discuss an awesome report. I mean, you guys at Altimeter Group just crank out terrific research. I'm just a big fan and consumer of it. So we're going to talk about the 2020 state of digital selling. And I want to say for my listener that yes, your observation is true, is accurate. I am talking about selling quite a bit. And there's a reason for that. And that is just because we're just living in a time that's just like no other time. And the marketer has to be very aligned with selling. And I know you see that all the time. So I'm excited to discuss the key findings from the 2020 State of Digital Selling Report. Hey, before we dive into it, though, let's just give our listener a brief either reintroduction or introduction to your company, the Altimeter Group. Tell us about the Altimeter Group.
Sure. So Altimeter Group, we're a research firm. We conduct research and then offer clients advice on any kind of digital disruptions, especially marketing, sales, go-to-market strategies, that sort of thing. Using typically digital is what we focus on, of course. And digital transformation, we have an annual digital transformation report that's quite popular as well. So we're part of Profit Brand Strategy, which is a broader global company that focuses on digital and consulting as well and management.
Fantastic. And that's Profit is in PROPHET.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So, so you're a research and advisory firm, the Altimeter Group, and you produced this really terrific report, the 2020 State of Digital Selling. I'd like to ask you, Ed, with the question, I'd like to begin by asking you the question, why? Why this topic, the state of digital selling in 2020?
Yeah. Well, we've done a lot of research and there has been a lot of research done and progression and maturity in digital marketing. We've been talking about digital marketing for a very long time. It's got a very mature ecosystem. a workforce that understands it, that can really drive results with it. And sales has been sort of they've been the customer of that in some ways, right? Sending over a qualified lead from marketing to sales, and then sort of sales has sort of been on their own. And what's really happening now is, we talked about the customer being the center of experience and the center of our businesses. Well, marketing is just that front end of a customer experience. They then go through sales, and then they go through service and customer success. So what we found in this research, and what our hypothesis was going into this, is that it's really important to connect all of those dots between those organizations and think about not just digital marketing, but digital selling, how they work together, and then customer success and service. So for us, it was completing a picture that really our clients and the people we talk to every day and advise, they needed to understand that. They needed to understand how to fill in that picture of a complete customer experience, to have the kind of relationship they need to resell, to upsell, to cross-sell, to get advocacy from customers. So we felt, and of course, COVID. Actually, I started this research in February, just before all the lockdowns.
Mhm.
And as I began it, of course, it became even more important to understand how digital can fuel and support the selling process, given where we are now with virtual selling being so important.
Yeah. I'm curious, how long you started in February. When did the report publish?
November.
November. Yeah. So late in 2020. So, I mean, really the better part of the year
Yeah.
to conduct the research, compile it, and go through the whole process of publishing it. That's a big undertaking.
Yeah, it is. We starting from scratch, we had to build a model for what digital selling looks like. We had to understand and define these capabilities and processes that were most important. So there was just a lot of foundational work that was necessary. And what I look forward to is, we're going to do this in 2021 as well. This year, we're going to update the report. It should be much easier because we have all the foundational work done, and then
Yeah.
we can start looking at trends. How are these insights that we've learned this year? How are they changing year to year? And what are people finding most effective and
Yeah.
most critical? So yeah.
So let's get into it. You've got six key findings. So we're going to try to cover each of them. I do want to encourage my listener to download the report. Of course, we'll include a link in the show notes for it, but it's at profit.com/download, then the 2020 State of Digital Selling. But again, it'll be in our show notes at vengreso.com. So again, we're going to try to get through the six key findings. And the first one is now more than ever, selling is a team sport. So you want to unpack that for us, Ed?
Sure. Yeah. And this gets back to that idea of all of the teams that touch the customer, they have to have a consistent view. They have to understand, what white papers the customer is reading from marketing, what service problems they're having, what kind of value propositions work in the sales process. So all of these things are really linked together. And as digital marketing has gotten more and more mature in terms of enablement and tools and data, that's really now put the emphasis on selling to come up to speed and to the same level in service. So what we found, and this was consistent across the survey questions, is those selling teams that had well aligned marketing, sales, and service teams always did better than others that didn't. So we were able to show through this research how important it is that all of these teams work together. And I think another thing that not just the working together part, but digital is a way of accelerating and scaling marketing and sales and service. As you do that, you shorten the time frame, or you make things more efficient. Well, if the handoffs aren't good between marketing and sales and service and real time as they need to be in our digital world, then you're starting to create gaps and bad experiences for customers. So digital and automation that it provides, it doesn't really, solve the problem of integration. There has to be a leadership alignment around digital selling, marketing, and success, and there has to be again this view of the customer that's consistent across all of these groups. So yeah.
As I reflect on my own career, I've spent some time in sales, software sales, early in my career. And then I moved into marketing roles, also in software companies. And then I ran my own marketing agency for several years before co-founding Vengreso about 4 years ago. And when we co-founded, when we launched Vengreso, my role in the company was CMO. For the first roughly 3.5 years, I was the CMO of Vengreso. So obviously that's a marketing role. But then July 2020, I moved into the role of Chief Customer Officer, where I run customer success. So I can tell you, Ed, that I spent a lot of time with sales to ensure that what our team is delivering is aligning with what was sold to them, and also just aligning with the long-term objectives of the relationship with the customer,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
then, of course, my own background in marketing as well, even comes into that. And on the things that we're doing, and I'm not going to get into too much detail, the things we're doing within customer success, there's definitely a marketing lens to it. So it comes full circle. Absolutely.
yeah. I think of Amazon and Amazon Web Services, for example. So a salesperson can sell a plan for a business to host their website, for example, but the money is actually made when they use it. So it's actually the usage that counts, and that's a service and support issue. It's not a sales issue, but they
Hmm.
need to be combined. They need to have one view. The salesperson needs to know that what they have sold has been effective and is actually in use. And I think as we go in more and more to services businesses, this is key.
Yep. The next key finding is sales teams need to make the digital mindset shift. Boy, we can talk about that for a long time, but go ahead and unpack that for us, Ed.
Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, you're right. There's so many facets to this. A lot of the questions we asked had to do with, are you comfortable with the digital skills you have? Are you adopting digital skills? Has that adoption resulted in results? Do you trust the data that you have to make decisions about leads, for example? So there's a lot of this actually boils down to trust, I think, and of course skills itself. But once a sales team develops or a salesperson develops the trust in the tools and the technology and the AI that might be leading them through a sales funnel, then that makes all the difference. So some of those questions that we asked about trust and about their ability to use data were important. But one of the other findings that was interesting is the technology industry really outperformed other industries when it came to digital selling. Now we can say yes, technology, they're digital companies, but it's bigger than that, isn't it? Because the company itself has a digital culture. They're in this business, and they're actually much more effective in this world and achieve higher results. So yeah, the culture shift, my gosh, and going back to social media when we've talked about that in the past in social business, culture and making that culture and mindset shift is so important.
Yep. So I want to add a little commentary to this because it falls, right into our wheelhouse of Vengreso, because we teach digital sales training, and we actually have a module in our training program. It's dedicated to the mindset, and the mindset that we teach, Ed, is really it's a two-edged coin. One is the mindset of the buyer. The buyer is digitally engaged, and so the seller needs to understand that the buyer is digitally engaged, and you can't engage a buyer through digital in a way that isn't going to be receptive or appealing to the buyer. You've got to engage them with value. So we talk about the buyer's mindset, then also we talk about the seller's mindset, and the seller's mindset needs to really shift and think about engaging digitally through value. So it's a huge, huge component of that modern selling, digital selling success factor. Like, you've got that mindset shift. It's make it or break it. If it's not there, it's not happening.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm glad you brought up the buyer in this process because we did ask in the research, we did ask questions about what the kinds of tools and technology that they provide to buyers and how effective they are. But what I'd love to do this year in 2021 is to do a B2B buyer survey to really understand exactly what they're looking for and what works for them. And because they're an equal part of this process. You can't do it without them. So understanding the buyer is key. And in the research we did here, we understood the buyer and we brought light to the buyer's needs through things like segmentation data and customer intelligence and usage data and things like that. But I think there's another sort of qualitative buyer experience angle that I'll focus on in the next version of this report.
Cool. Can't wait to see that. We'll probably have you back for that one too, Ed. So we have to wait. Don't have to wait 4 years to bring you back. All right. The next key finding is high touch, high value, cross functional selling outperforms automated high volume selling. Let's unpack that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this gets back to the teamwork, kind of the first finding that teamwork matters. These teams, these cross-functional teams that partner on key accounts, so that if you're talking about one key account and you've got somebody from marketing and sales and service there, and you're partnering together on a plan, we found those to be much more effective in terms of results, achieving revenue goals, achieving customer success goals, that sort of thing. So again, this reinforces the fact that digital it's not just digital, it's people.
Right.
It's people teaming together and getting the highest results. Now the lower end, so there were three models we tested for selling. One was this high touch, high values, and they were deals that were typically above, say, $500,000. And then we had a middle tier that was about 100,000, and then this high volume, low cost tier were things like, businesses like Adobe selling Acrobat to business users, for example. So lower cost, that's on high volume. Those underperformed. And what I think we saw in the research is that the user experiences for those are just not quite where they need to be. I think that, that's something that's going to happen. If you look at B2B or B2C commerce, Amazon, Walmart, the leaders there, they've developed some pretty mature practices. But B2B has not really taken all of those kinds of learnings and applied it to their B2B customers. And frankly, their B2B customers expect those kinds of things because of their B2C, their general
The experience, yeah. No,
yeah,
Amazon and Walmart and Target, they've trained us, right? Because
yeah.
we use them, we buy from them, and then we go to a B2B e-commerce scenario, and many times it pales in comparison.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that may be one reason why these, again, these models of high volume automated selling are not quite meeting the mark. And it'll be really interesting to see over the next couple of years as we benchmark this data, how it changes and see some results.
Okay. So the fourth key finding is that top performers focus on the customer through customer focused metrics and cross functional teaming and selling by vertical industry. Now, some of that I think we've already touched on, but you've got it as a separate key finding.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was somewhat surprised. So there was a question we asked about, what are the most important metrics to you, and how do you achieve, or how are you achieving in those goals? And the customer satisfaction goal was actually number one in all of the types of questions we asked, followed by revenue and growth and year-over-year growth and those kinds of metrics. So that was actually really encouraging, because getting back to what we've talked about before how the customer needs to be the center of this, those successful companies are focused on the customer. And what we found is some of the digital sellers that were not as mature, they were focused things like on revenue growth. And rather than leveraging existing customers and really optimizing the value from those customers, they tended to seek out new customers. So it was it was an interesting combination of factors there. And then selling by an industry vertical. I imagine you talk about this as well. And, in B2B, what customers want, what buyers want, is they want trusted advisors who really understand their industry.
Oh, we talk
And
about that all the time.
yeah, and boy, they totally outperformed other models, like, for example, selling by geography or by selling by product line or something like that. It was really all about selling by industry and having those really smart sales folks who understand the industry that they're selling to.
Yep. And again, from a marketing standpoint, help aligning with sales to be able to deliver the tools, the content, the events that really deliver that trusted advisor element that every sales individual is looking to achieve in the modern selling world. So
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
All right. So the fifth key finding, we're getting there. We're getting there, almost at the sixth one. The fifth one is as they build digital excellence, boundaries are likely to blur between sales and marketing teams.
Yeah, yeah. So I had some really interesting conversations with folks about this, and I don't know if that this came up in my conversation with you specifically, Bernie, when I interviewed you for this report. But there were others who talk about this idea of left brain, right brain, where marketing is sort of the left brain, very analytically focused, very data focused, make decisions based on that, versus a sales team or a salesperson who might be more, sort of gut feeling about what this buyer is doing or wants, more relationship based. So they're very complementary, of course. But what's happening is as sales teams become more digitally mature, they're relying much more now on data, analytics, technology, AI to guide their next moves. So there's this shift in, competency between marketing and sales. And actually, one example I liked that I brought up in the report is Moneyball. So what happened to Major League Baseball, which went from this transition? I believe it was the Oakland A's who made this first
Yep.
transition from, we've got these managers and owners who are, very relationship focused and gut feel, to people now who make these they're Ivy League trained and with heavy experience in analytics and math, making these kinds of decisions. So I see the similar shift that baseball went through in sales, where as they become more digitally aware, more digitally enabled, that the relationship between marketing and sales will change. And one example of that is a qualified lead. So if you get a qualified lead from marketing, you hand it off to sales. How valuable is that to sales when they already have prospecting tools, when they already do their own lead generation through prospecting? So I think there'll be some very interesting interfaces that'll be changing and handoffs between marketing and sales as sales becomes more digitally enabled.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts on that. One is the qualified lead, as you mentioned. As we know, a lot of that is based on metrics like scoring and different scoring techniques, right, along with intent signals and that sort of thing. But the other thing that comes to mind, Ed, this may surprise you. It actually surprised us at Vengreso. But, again, we're in the business of providing digital sales training. So we work with B2B sales teams from small, 15, 20 to big, 500, 1,000, and everything in between. So we're talking to companies, leaders, and do you know that almost 50% of the time that we win a deal, we get brought in, it was championed by the CMO or the head of marketing if the title's not CMO?
Yeah.
That surprised us. Does that surprise you?
No, actually, a lot of the client work that we start actually does come from the CMO because they want to complete this cycle with sales.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, so it's not surprising, and I think that speaks to, again, sales has not made, including sales leadership, they may not have made the complete shift yet to this digital culture and thinking about selling.
Right.
So I think the CMOs are out there helping that. And the other trend we saw is the chief revenue officer and the
Yep.
idea of combining sales and marketing under one leader, and not only one leader, but one operations team, so that the enablement of sales and marketing is consistent and connected and works well together. So yeah,
Yep.
those are the kinds of things we're seeing too.
Yep. Exactly. All right. We're on the sixth and final key finding, and that is that digitally mature sellers are outperforming less mature teams through the global COVID-19 pandemic.
Hmm.
So that's an interesting one. And I'll have to preface your commentary by saying we're seeing the same thing. I mean, we're seeing it in our business. So go ahead and unpack that. What did you find in your your research?
Yeah, so there was a very strong correlation between those that were mature digital sellers and their success during COVID. You know, part of it is obvious. They have the enablement tools, they have the digital culture, they have the data, they have leadership aligned, they have all the key ingredients to do that. So they're well, positioned to succeed through this. But it was nice to actually quantify it. There were things that, yeah, we're probably going to find this, but how big of a difference is it? And it was pretty significant. And I think one of the things that we saw as a real gap in selling teams was field sales. When field sales could not visit customers. If you're selling medical equipment to a hospital, especially a hospital at
Yeah,
this
yeah,
point, you just can't waltz in and talk to the doctor that you used to talk to.
right.
So there was real, panic, frankly. And okay, how are we going to do this? We've got to get this done now. We can't just have a pilot. We've got to get our sales team transitioned. We've got to get them to understand this. We've got to get them connected to marketing and Salesforce automation and marketing automation. So it definitely we did see a big uptick in the the priority to make this kind of transition, and not surprisingly, because we've just all been tested by the pandemic and what it requires of us when it comes to selling.
Yeah, you mentioned hospitals. That's certainly an industry that has been, disrupted from the standpoint of how they buy. So if you sell to hospitals, that's a very difficult transition to make. But there are many other industries where the buyer simply is working from home. And so the shift then, we talked about this in finding number one or two, right, on the digital mindset, is the seller now just needs to engage with that buyer at home, and that buyer is doing their job. They're just working from home, which again, that's not the case in the hospital industry, but there are many other industries where that is the case. And the modern digital sellers have made that transition, or they're in the process of making that transition to becoming that modern digital seller.
Yeah, yeah, and it's exciting time to see this. I mean, it's absolutely terrible that we had to have a global pandemic to make this to accelerate this, but
Yeah.
we've got to be resilient. These sales teams are learning that they have to be resilient against any kind of disruption like this, and that digital can offer that. So it's happening.
Yep. Yep. So, Ed, we have covered the six key findings. So, what I'd like to do now is just do a recap of our conversation. And I think you know the drill because you've been here before.
Yeah.
So I'll do a recap, and then I'll ask you to add any commentary after the recap, and then we'll ask you for your digital contact information and just bring this episode to a wrap. This episode is brought to you by Postal.io, a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Postal allows you to automate and personalize your offline outreach to both existing customers and new prospects at scale. Learn how you can easily integrate direct mail, gifts, charitable donations, and even alcohol into your existing sales, marketing, and retention strategies. Visit Postal.io today and request a demo so you can boost your pipeline and close more deals. So we began our conversation with either a reintroduction or an introduction to your company, the Altimeter Group, and that is that you are a research firm and advisory firm, really focused on digital disruption, helping companies develop their go-to-market strategies, really working with marketing and sales organizations. You produce a bunch of great research like the one we discussed here today, along with your annual digital transformation report, and you are part of the Profit Company. And of course, the report that we're discussing today is the 2020 State of Digital Selling, which published in November of 2020. We're recording this in early 2021. And so when I asked you why you produced this report, I really, I didn't ask you that question before we recorded. So I wanted to hear your answer for the first time. And I like it. The maturity of digital marketing is exactly that. It's mature. So, looking at the state of digital selling is really an opportunity to look at how marketing, sales, and customer service really come together to complete that picture of the full customer life cycle. And so that really provided that strong sort of motivation and rationale for this report. And I'm glad you did it. So, of course, we covered the 6 key findings. And the first one is that now more than ever, selling is a team sport. And that's all the teams that are touching the customer have to have that same view. They need to understand what value proposition really resonates with the customer. And you realize that organizations that are well aligned with marketing, sales, and customer success were the most successful in the research that you did. The second key finding was that sales teams need to make the digital mindset shift. And a big amen on that. The reps that really trust in the digital tools, they're the ones that have made that digital mindset shift. You mentioned that the tech industry really is outperforming others in digital selling. We see a lot of that too, although we see some maturity in the services marketplace as well. And then those sellers that also have the mindset of delivering value is part of that digital mindset shift. And we see that all the time in Vengreso and the programs that we deliver to our customers. And then the third key finding is high touch, high value, cross-functional selling outperforms automated high volume selling. And, I love your point about how, the technology is awesome, but the people really make it happen. Teamwork matters. Cross-functional teams that partner really achieve higher results. Love that point. Then the next key finding we discuss is that top performers focus on the customer through customer-focused metrics, cross-functional teaming, and selling by vertical industry. And the key takeaway for me is that the customer satisfaction goal is the goal that is ranked the highest in importance by the companies that are the most mature in digital selling. They prioritize customer satisfaction over new customer acquisition. And so that's a really key finding, key takeaway on that. And I really appreciate that. And then the fifth key finding is as they're building a digital excellence, boundaries are likely to blur between sales and marketing teams. And so that's all about is sales teams are becoming more mature. They're really aligning around data and technology. And so you use the example of how many organizations have put in place the CRO, the Chief Revenue Officer. So there's one operations team, sales, marketing, customer service under the CRO that really just owns the entire customer journey. And that's really, that's a form of digital excellence that's blurring those lines. And then the sixth key finding, Ed, was that digitally mature sellers are outperforming less mature sellers through the global COVID-19 pandemic. And you said that, the enablement tools, the alignment with marketing, the digital mindset, all of that really comes together. And as companies have really just by necessity have had to really embrace digital selling, that maturity has come along with the aided by rather the enablement tools, and then the mindset of being aligned between marketing and customer success. So I think that's one of the fastest summaries I've done for as much content as we covered. So Ed, I'll invite you to add any commentary to the summary.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, Bernie, is just speaking to the marketers out there and the CMOs listening to this. Get ready to help your sales teams succeed. Be that bridge. Be that you're years and years ahead of many of these leaders and teams that are trying to embrace digital. So I really hope that marketers will continue to see themselves as these partners, that they're ready and willing to maybe even initiate with sales these kinds of discussions and transition, because they need your help, and you're the best position to do that.
Just a big amen to that. I can tell you that in 2017, 18, and 19, Vengreso spent a lot of time talking to sales leaders and marketing leaders, sort of convincing them that this thing called digital selling, this whole digital mindset, what we've discussed here today, Ed, was legit, like really a thing. Fast forward to 2020 and the pandemic, and convincing didn't need to happen. The convincing happened because of the way the world changed.
Yeah.
So this is a great topic, and I just look forward to seeing you continue to cover it, Ed. And as I said, I'm a fan, a consumer of your research. So I want to thank you for coming back on the podcast and sharing the results, the findings from this report, the 2020 State of Digital Selling. Ed, where can people connect with you online?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, just search for Ed Terpening, Altimeter. I think I'm the only Ed Terpening on LinkedIn, but maybe not. But you should be able to find me there. Also, Twitter is Ed. That's at Ed Terpening, EDTERPENING. And I'm working on 2021's report. We're also working on some other tools to help people self-assess their maturity and get ready for this. So they should look for any tweets from me on that, and posts on LinkedIn to learn more and keep up with this. So
fantastic. And Altimeter is altimeter.com?
yes, that's right. No, I'm
Okay.
sorry,
Fantastic.
altimetergroup.com.
Altimetergroup.com.
Yes.
Okay. My bad. I'm glad I asked, and I'm glad you clarified.
Who knows where we'll be sending them?
That's right. That's right. Well, Ed, thank you so much for joining me and coming back on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
My pleasure, Bernie. Thank you.
Hey, don't forget to visit postal.io to learn how you can integrate direct mail and gifting into your existing strategy. Postal.io is a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Hey, that's a wrap for this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Hey, if you're not subscribed, I invite you to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so that you don't miss a single episode. And I'd love it if you give the Modern Marketing Engine podcast a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps others to discover it. You know, we publish a show notes page for each episode with links to the resources that were mentioned during the conversation. Just go to Vengreso.com and navigate to the podcast menu. And while you're there, be sure to check out our Modern Selling podcast hosted by Vengreso's CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Hey, are you following the Modern Marketing Engine podcast on the socials? We're active on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. In fact, we publish each episode on YouTube for those who listen to audio content on YouTube. Hey, one last thing. If you and I are not connected on LinkedIn, I invite you to send me a personal invitation to connect. Now, please be sure to say that you're a listener of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you don't include a personal note, I have no way of knowing that that's how you found me. Until next time, I wish you continued success on your modern marketing journey.